what a result this was. Limerick strike back. Limerick-3-26, Cork-1-16 at the Gaelic Grounds. I mean, if ever a performance made you be like, wow, like the first half that Limerick put on with the goals from Gillan and from Adam English, just awesome. Real showcasing of the power that they still possess.
Yeah, I mean, if there's Limerick, like you said, the Empire strikes back. It truly did. Anyone that was writing off Limerick for the All Ireland this year, I don't think they'll be doing that now. Anyways, that's for sure. And whether people will be taking back their estimations about whether Cork will win it or not, waits to be seen. Pat Ryan spoke very honestly on RT Sport there, just about Limerick were better, they worked harder, and they're just going to have to perform better next week against Waterford at home. They'll owe it to their support, because there was a great Cork support there today. But just from the first whistle, to be honest, from the first score of the game, English led it off to Lynch led it off to Morrissey. The way they just made that move, Barcelona-esque move, you just knew from there, you're like, right, this could be a long day. And Morrissey was getting a score, then again 2 seconds later, he had 2 points within 90 seconds, and you were thinking, right, this could be a long afternoon for Cork. Just Limerick were absolutely incredible from start to finish. First of all, from a Cork perspective, that was an atrocious performance. Like, it genuinely was. Like, considering what they did to them last year in the championship, considering the way they started against Limerick in the league was how Limerick started here today. Only there was no comeback from Cork today like there was from Limerick that day. The full back line from Limerick was so exposed. Like, Niall O'Leary had a torrid time on Aaron Gillan. I thought Owen Downey had a really tough time with Shane O'Brien. Like, Shane O'Brien, I don't think scored that much, or did he score at all? But just his movement and his physicality and his speed just absolutely bullied him all over the place. Sean O'Donoghue had a tough afternoon. Rob Downey struggled on Garrod Hegarty. You put someone the same height, the same size, same ability as Rob Downey on him, like a Garrod Hegarty, and you saw the result there. Hegarty was just tapping the ball over the bar with absolute ease, with or without the wind. Just the marking from Cork was awful. There was no marking whatsoever half the time. Limerick had all the time in the world to be picking out their men, to be finding the full forward line. I know Kyle Hayes was unbelievable. He got man of the match from RT, but for me, he only scored 1 point from play. But Cian Lynch, I mean, call him Messi, call him Maradona, call him Zidane, whatever you want. But he was Michael Jordan, but he was the instigator today. He was unbelievable. His link-up play, his understanding with Nicky Quaid, his understanding with Adam English in the middle, with Gillan in the full forward line was exceptional. Limerick's work rate as well was outstanding. It was absolutely terrific. Their strength, their tenacity in the tackle, winning the ball back, turnovers was absolutely just on fire. Like Cork as well, they only had 2 points from play after 23 minutes. That is not what we've come to expect from Cork, especially the full forward line. Patrick Horgan was really the only one that you could have looked at and said he was the only one that looked like a spark, or the only one that could get a score from the full forward line. Brian Hayes was struggling big time. Alan Connolly, the first time I found out he got the ball was in the second half, when he did eventually get on the ball and he won a free, and he was doing that dart and run at the fullback that we've become used to, but it just didn't happen enough. It just didn't. And yeah, Limerick were absolutely on fire. I've been a big admirer of Adam English for a long time, and today was arguably, in my opinion, his best performance in a Limerick jersey. He was absolutely outstanding. He was terrific. The goal he got, like you said, was unbelievable. The penalty as well in the second half that Cork gave away was just silly from Downey, to be honest. Like, once you're bringing Aaron Gillan, once you're pulling out of him, dragging out of him, he's obviously going to go down, but like, there was no arguments. The referee was absolutely right to give it. And it was a shame from a Cork perspective, because Horgan had just blasted in a 21-yard free, similar to what Sean Curry did against Kilkenny today, only Horgan's one went into the top corner. And to then just concede a penalty up the other end straight away, it's just horrible from them. But Limerick showed today why they've won 6 in a row in Munster. They showed why they were on the verge of 5 in a row last year, and I'd say they took that defeat to Cork last year very, very personally. 2-18 to 9 points at half-time is an outrageous scoreline. It's standing ovation going off the pitch, and they richly deserved it. But yeah, there's so much for Cork to work on for next weekend against Waterford. It's frightening.
No, it certainly is. This performance reminded me of, you remember, like the Munster Hurling final against Tip in 2021, where they just came out in the second half and blew them away. Like, in terms of a half, and the performance that they gave in that first half against Cork. They decimated a team that had beat them twice last year. And a lot of people were kind of saying that, you know, Cork were the kryptonite, if you like, to Limerick. That Limerick wouldn't be able to get back at them. And yeah, just the way that they performed in that first half was terrifying to look at. And Gillan's goal was superb. Adam English's goal was superb. We've comments in here about Cian Lynch. A2 says once they had a lead, it was over. Cian Lynch, an absolute joy to watch. You pay to see him play magician. And Brian also says the flicks, tricks, and touches from Cian Lynch was incredible. What a magical player. You mentioned it there as well. For Limerick as well, another one of the million positives it feels like from this game is the form of Cian Lynch, because it feels like as good as he's been, we haven't seen him at his best over the last 2 years, I think. But by God, that was as good as we've ever seen him.
Yeah, no, he was absolutely terrific. Just some of his flicks, like even at one stage, Martin Morris was just saying, how does he do that? And I was wondering, especially like when you've 45,000 people looking at you and it's the most intense game of the year. It's a hot day as well. And you've bodies, big men around you, and you're just doing flicks and tricks like he was and picking out the passes that he was. Never looking to be selfish. Maybe on one or two occasions he could have been and popped it over the bar, but he was always looking for the right man in the right position, which makes him a completely it just separates him from the rest of players across the country, really. I thought he kind of came back to his old self in a way against Waterford the last day to a degree, but here he stepped it up another level. I think another big positive for Limerick as well is their bench as well. Peter Casey came on, scored a couple of points. Michael O'Neill just came on and just strut around the place and got three magnificent points from my recollection as well. He was just unbelievable. And like when you're bringing players like that off the bench and you see what they do have in the starting 15, it's terrifying. Like we've mentioned over the last while who has the best squad in the country, and I think after today you've still got to say Limerick do have the best squad in the country if you're bringing the likes of them off the bench, and like they would start for every other team across the country, let's be honest.
Yeah, they would. Jer asks here, was there nobody else to put on the freeze after Huggy put so many wide? Again, is that an issue for Cork? Maybe not having someone behind him?
Well, Fitzgibbon was anonymous in this game, so maybe you could have thought if he'd gotten a free or two over the bar, maybe he could have done something for him. Decky Dalton went off injured early on, which was a massive miss for them as well. Now, Brian Roach, I felt, came on and actually did all right in patches, to be fair to him. Like, he certainly wasn't the worst on the pitch. I mean, Jimmy Harndy came on. He actually played very well as well. He got 2 good points, won a free as well. But yeah, look, Horgan still hit a few nice frees over the bar at the same time and took his 21-yard free, buried it into the back of the net. So I don't think Horgan's free taking today was really the big issue for Cork, to be honest with you. And I don't think it would have made much of a difference in the end. And look, Horgan's an experienced free taker. I wouldn't worry about him missing a couple today. He's still got a big number of them, especially a few long range ones in the second half, albeit with the wind on his side. But yeah,
it was just that type of day for Cork, though, wasn't it? Like, it was just that type of day where all systems were failing. Like, it couldn't shut down the Limerick forwards. They couldn't punish Limerick down at the other end. Some of the frees didn't go over. Like, it just was that type of day. And look, when Limerick perform like that, when Limerick perform like that, it almost seems like they've heard you talk about them in the back room or something, that they're coming out and they're just going to absolutely tear you apart. Because when Limerick have that momentum, that special momentum that they had in the second half of that Munster final against Tip a few years ago, the same energy that they had against Cork in this first half, they are unstoppable. Like, when they really get going and the crowd get behind them, they are unstoppable. And the team that they're always compared to is that Kilkenny team of the 2000s that did the 4 in a row as well. And what I was asking at the start of this year was, I was saying, what did that Kilkenny team do when they lost to Tip in 2010? They came back and they won it in 2011 and they won it in 2012. And they proved, and then they won it in 2014 and 2015. They proved without any question that they were the best across what you could consider to be 2 completely separate eras. Limerick are now being asked that same question. Cork beat you. They were your undoing in the 2024 championship. Now, how do you respond in 2025? If they can come back and win the All-Ireland, it's a monumental achievement that puts them even more up there competing with that Kilkenny team for the title of the greatest team of all time.
Yeah, and you factor in that Kilkenny also got to the final in 2016 when really they probably shouldn't have, considering the amount of players they had injured as well.
Yeah.
Prairie, So yeah, no, they're right up there. They absolutely are. And like I think I said to myself during the week that Limerick will win this game, but Cork, I feel, might win the Munster final. I'm really starting to reconsider that now. This Limerick team just looks unstoppable. And like you said, when they're playing like this, there's not a team across the country that can stop them, really. Like you were looking at Cork as possibly the best of the rest to try and take down Limerick, and you see what they've done to them there today. Just absolutely random socks from minute 1 to minute 70. It wasn't even a contest, to be honest with you. So yeah, that is the big for Limerick, and John Kiley be well aware of that as well. He wants Limerick to be the best, and he knows that, you know, they didn't perform last year in that semi-final. You know, Cork were well worth their win. Now saying that, Limerick, it was a 2-point defeat. You know, they still could have edged it at the end, and nobody would have said anything after that. They'd have just said, you know, Limerick get the job done when they probably shouldn't have. But, you know, I'd say they're probably more hungry now than ever to get the job done, because, like you said, losing in the way they did last year, and after being so dominant over the last number of years, and especially as well seeing they're two big rivals in Cork and Clare competing in an All-Ireland final last year. I've no doubt in my mind that they'd have been watching that final last year and thinking we should be there. And given this day, given their performance again away to Waterford, which was also exceptional, and listen, they went out to Thurles, which we've seen there today is a tough place to go to, and to get a draw on a wet day as well. Yeah, they're probably now going to be the front runners in the morning to bring Liam McCarthy back to the treaty.
Well, you'd be certainly brave to bet against them, wouldn't you? We've loads of comments flooding in here about how good Limerick's performance was. I'll start with Brian O'Riordan. Says the strength off the Limerick bench is incredible. To be able to bring off that standard is amazing. Sean O'Malley says this will benefit Cork going forward, though. They know what to expect from Limerick when they're motoring and are bound to not let that happen again. John Coleman says too many injuries last season for Limerick. It cost them. A2 says Limerick are walking the All-Ireland lads. And Brian says this was very big and a massive statement. Limerick are unbeatable when they play like this. And Fia Innes says this was probably Lynch's finest performance. And then this from a Clare man is a hell of a compliment. Jared says, in fairness, given the difference in championship format, Limerick edged the great Kilkenny team, having done 2 round robins in a row. I did always say that what Limerick had to come through in Munster was far harder. Like on a different planet harder than what Kilkenny had to come through in the Leinster Championship. Like Dublin back then in the late 2000s were not as good as we are now. Offaly were on the downturn at that point. Wexford were not anywhere near as good as they are now back then. Kilkenny basically walked Leinster every year, and that was kind of half the reason why Galway were thrown in there as well, because Leinster needed a competitor to Kilkenny. And so bear in mind, Limerick have had 2 teams who didn't beat them in the Munster Championship go on to win the All-Ireland, and Tip in 2019 and Clare obviously last year. So that says it all, really, doesn't it? That like teams can be good enough to win the All-Ireland but still not beat Limerick in Munster. And Limerick have also won those like 5 All-Irelands in 6 years to boot. Like, it's been remarkable what we've seen, and I don't think we've seen it all yet, because that comment in from John Coleman, too many injuries last season for Limerick, it cost them. I did think this, and I was chatting to Matthew there earlier today before the game, and I was saying, if you were Aaron Gillan, or if you're Cian Lynch, or if you're Gearóid Hegarty, especially their forwards, I would think this. You realise, if you're Aaron Gillan, for example, that every game you play, every single game you play, you literally have somebody like a Conor Prunty, like a Conor Cleary, like, Sean O'Donoghue if you're Aaron Gillan. You realise that every game you play, there's a world-class defender who's been prepped to mark you. And they are going, and you're wondering at that point, you're taking knock after knock after knock after knock. Like, in every game Gillan plays, he probably comes out with a scratch. And you wonder, how long can they keep doing that for? And maybe losing their grip on the crown might give them the energy to go and do it for longer now. And it would be really, really, really interesting to see if anyone can stop them. A2 says Limerick were literally like that assassin who watches his target before he kills them. They've been waiting for Cork for a year. Unbelievable way to put it, A2. Fiona says the big news otherwise is the return of Peter Casey. Frightening what he has been through. Absolutely. He's had some horrific injuries. But when he is on it, he is a real joy to watch as well. He's like a real flair player, Peter Casey. He's like the type that you can't seem to stop him when he gets going. And it's like you have to stop him before he takes flight, because if he gets into the groove, you're screwed. Like you genuinely are. Sean says here, Tip seem to be one of the only teams who can match Limerick's physicality throughout the course of a game. Well, that brings us on nicely to the next game. If you have any comments in, guys, because you've 25 people watching now, love to see it. If you have any comments in about the game, throw them in. But we are going to move on now to the Tipperary versus Waterford game. Actually, we won't. I'll ask you one question, Liam, before we move on. And it's from a Cork perspective. So if you're Pat Ryan and you're in the dressing room with them lads, how do you even go about preparing? Because on top of that, I know Waterford lost a tip, but I'm sure Waterford would have been looking at the phone, getting the result in from the Limerick Cork game and absolutely jumping for joy at that, because by God, it's a bad prep for the Waterford game for Cork. So for Pat Ryan, for Cork, how do they recover in time to get the job done against Waterford and save themselves?
Well, I suppose, first of all, home advantage is massive, because they have been incredible at home this year. You know, the only game they didn't win in the league at home was against Limerick, ironically. And then, you know, they've won every game there since, and a lot of them quite comfortably as well. So home advantage, again, is massive, and they will bring out a big support, because Cork generally always do, especially at home. I suppose the one thing Pat Ryan will have to remember as well is that Waterford bet them last year, you know, and they know firsthand they cannot take Waterford for granted. And Waterford didn't even play that badly today, you know. So Pat Ryan will certainly watch that game either tonight or tomorrow and realise, right, there's areas we can get at, but there's also areas we need to be very, very wary of, and the threat that Waterford bring. And I suppose, look, all you've got to do is literally just say, right, this was a bad day. We were beaten by the better team, and we've just got to move on as quickly as possible. Because if Cork go into next weekend's game in any way, shape or form, not feeling it, or feeling like, oh, this game is already won, or, you know, we have this in the bag or anything like that, then Waterford, Peter Creeley will have a plan, and they would love more than to knock Cork out of the All-Ireland. There's no question about that. So, yeah, all you can do really is get them back into training. Probably say to them, listen, don't listen to social media for the week. Don't look at anything online. Just focus on Waterford next Sunday. It's the biggest game of Cork's season so far. Win and you're in the Munster final. That's the thing as well. They win that game, they're in the Munster final, because they have the head-to-head rule on Tipperary. So it really is that simple for them. I think a draw probably keeps them in as well. I believe maybe on points difference over Waterford. I'm not sure what it is at the moment off the top of my head. But just simply, listen, do not take Waterford for granted. Don't let today's result against Tipperary fool you. Don't let home advantage fool you either, because at the end of the day, sometimes that can work against you. And remember, as a bit like Limerick remembering that Cork bet them last year, remember Waterford bet us last year. Let's send out another, and let's all. And I'd say Pat Ryan, he kind of said ironically, I wouldn't want another crack at Limerick if they're this good again. But I'm sure at the back of his mind, he's now thinking we need to get these lot again, and we need to prove that today was a fluke.
Absolutely, well put. I think this weekend has been a key indication of do not get caught up in the moment. Do not think that one result equals everything. Like Limerick definitely are not satisfied with the amount that they've won. They want to win more. Cork are not all of a sudden a terrible team. They had a bad day at the office, but they still are that side that beat Limerick twice last year. They still are that side that was a whisker away from winning the All-Ireland last season. And they still have incredible players and an incredible team. We have a lot of comments in here. A2 puts it well. He says, honestly feel the opposite. Waterford are going to be in for a huge backlash if Cork have anything about them at all. And Rudders here says, Cork Limerick Munster final looks like will be interesting after today. A2 says, all these teams are so strong. If one team is off it by 5%, they'll take a beating. And Brian says, it was a bad day at the office for Cork. They will bounce back next weekend. Genuinely, like if you look at it that way, we've seen Dublin were written off by everybody. They would go away and they beat Galway in Pearse Stadium. We've seen examples of don't get caught up in the moment. A team can have a bad day at the office, but they're still capable of bouncing back the next week. And I absolutely agree with you, A2. I think if Cork have if Cork are that team that can win the All-Ireland, they come back better than ever against Waterford next week. And what we've seen in the past with Cork is Cork are capable of handing out a beating as well. They handed one out to Tipperary last year. Like, they are capable of it. So, therefore, if I were Waterford, you need to be in full combat readiness as well, because Cork are capable of putting a beating on you. But Waterford stung Cork last year. They will not be afraid of them, and they have the capability to knock out Cork. Can you imagine if Cork and Clare both go out in the Munster Championship? Unbelievable stuff.